G'day everyone, I'm Danmarsky. Welcome back to those of you who subscribe to the channel or have been watching my videos. I greatly appreciate your support. And if you're new here to this channel, guys, I've got a little bit for nearly everyone out there. I drop videos on basketball history, sneaker reviews, rugby league history, and in my many travels I've got vlogs from different parts of the world, in particular where I was living in London a couple of years ago. But guys, we always keep it fresh here at Danmarsky, and of course I'm a singer-songwriter, rapper, and create and produce original music. So guys, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and click that bell for notifications, and let's get to it. Okay, today's video is a very special one because a couple of months ago in July we saw the Tokyo Olympics, and obviously being a basketball fan myself and also a fan of any type of competition, I can appreciate any type of sport. We saw so many amazing performances, but obviously one of the highlights, particularly for myself being an Australian basketball fan, is for the first time in Olympic history, Australia, the men's team, won a medal at the Olympics. And it was a really amazing moment when Australia won that bronze medal, defeating Slovenia in that bronze medal match. And yeah, I just thought, since this was such an historic event, it got me thinking about all the years that I've been watching basketball, but obviously in this case Olympic basketball, but also just international basketball from an Aussie perspective, and our Australian Boomers team. And I thought, all the great players, the coaches, and I guess how proud they would be of this current Australian team here in 2021, taking out the medal for the first time in the nation's history in men's basketball. So what I've done is I have created an all-time greatest Australian Boomers basketball team, starting five, as well as the usual 7 players coming off the bench and the greatest all-time coach. So let's check it out. Okay, so I'm going to announce the team first and then just have a little bit of a chat, somewhat of a deep dive into each player's career and why I chose that particular player. And there's a couple of notable omissions as well, obviously, in such a great, team that you're going to choose, such as this, an all-time Aussie basketball team. So my starting five: at point guard, Paddy Mills. At starting shooting guard, Andrew Gaze. Starting small forward, Joe Ingles. Starting power forward, played mostly centre, but we've got 2 huge bodies here, so I couldn't split them, in terms of Andrew Bogut at the 4 spot and Luke Longley at centre. Then coming off the bench, I've got point guard and often a shooting guard, Shane Heal. Then Eddie Pavlinskas, might not be a name that's too familiar to many of you out there, but we'll have a chat about Eddie's career, and he was quite a prolific basketballer, that's for sure. Then some of the bigs coming off the bench: Mark Bradkey, then David Anderson, then scrappy, all-heart, hustling combo guard, Matt Dellavedova. A shooting guard, another one that you might not be so familiar with, the name Ian Davies, but again I'll introduce you to you young people out there, who Ian Davies was and why he's on my team. And finally, rounding out that 12th man on the roster, Andrew Vlahoff. And my all-time greatest coach, Barry Barnes. So now we'll go into each player's credentials and just some of the highlights of their career, particularly their international career. So we start off here with Paddy Mills, and I think Paddy really picks himself at the point guard spot. And being captain, of this most recent team. So there's 2 members of this current 2021 team that have made this all-time great Boomers team, and that's obviously Paddy and Joe Ingles. And like I said, Paddy picks himself. I think just in terms of his attributes, his quickness, his agility, his incredible quick release jump shooting, Incredible range. You know, he can hit consistently from 4 to 5 feet beyond the 3-point line. But yeah, just obviously his speed is his number one asset. And then from an intangible point of view, the man has heart. He has such determination. You can see it. It just oozes out of him. He's such just a genuine character. And he's definitely one of my basketball heroes. He always has been ever since I first saw him. I first saw him in 2007 playing for St. Mary's College in America. And actually, no, okay, story time. I just remembered, whoa, no, I actually saw Patty Mills in the flesh for the first time in 2006. Yeah. Or was it 2005? It was when I was an early school teacher. It was either my first or second year, and we did a Canberra trip from the school I was teaching in Brisbane. That's right. That's right, yeah. And we did a trip to the Australian Institute of Sport. And I remember seeing this short guy that was basically about the same height as me, 180 centimeters. And he was just zipping all around the court. His handle was amazing. That's another one of his great attributes. Great ball handler. Protects the ball, values the ball, very few turnovers. And I was really taken with this guy. It was almost like watching, I guess, an Aussie version of Allen Iverson, just super quick. Obviously not with the incredible athleticism in terms of leaping ability and big hands like AI had for such a small player. But it was like that. It was like an Aussie Allen Iverson. He was zipping all around. I remember that because I went and shot some hoops with the kids on the courts at the AIS, the Australian Institute of Sport. But yeah, anyway, just thought I'd pass on that personal experience with Patty Mills. But yeah, we sat there and watched him for a good hour. That was awesome. And there's a few other notable players playing there too. But Patty obviously being the most notable. But from an international perspective, a lot of people don't realise in the 2012 London Olympics, Patty Mills actually was the leading scorer, average-wise, points per game. He just slightly edged out Kevin Durant of the USA, so that's not a bad little notch on your belt, right? Beating out Kevin Durant, one of the great scorers of all time in the sport of basketball, period, in an international tournament. And then obviously his, he's played, 4 consecutive Olympics now? 08, 12, 16, and then these most recent ones, 2021 in Tokyo. Won an NBA championship. Obviously, the NBA is the premier basketball league in the world, and us Aussies are very proud that Patty won a championship in 2014 with the San Antonio Spurs. And I think there was one in the closeout game, Game 5, and they beat LeBron and the Miami Heat. What a great victory! Good on you, Patty. And I believe he scored something like 15 of his 17 points. I think it was either down the stretch or in the third quarter, but he was just raining bombs. Remember, three-pointer after three-pointer that really, really stuck the dagger in the hearts of the Miami Heat to win the championship for the Spurs. But yeah, Patty Mills, point guard for sure, my all-time greatest Australian team. Now we come to Drewy, Andrew Gaze. So maybe some more casual basketball fans around the world don't know Andrew Gaze, but you should. Because he's probably our most celebrated basketball player of all time, actually, here in Australia. He won 2 of our local NBL championships, 1993-97. But more so, every year in, year out, he was winning the scoring title, averaging consistently around 28 to 30, 32 points per game. Just an incredible shooter. A lot of people refer to him as the Australian Larry Bird, because he's kind of similar to Larry Bird, where incredible shooter, just great fundamentals, brilliant free throw shooter, 3-point range, legitimate, surprisingly good all around player despite lacking athleticism. He could get in and rebound, very smart passer, and solid team defender. And could get to the cup too. So for example, if you watch. A good game to watch Drewy was the 1994 World Championships period. So in between Barcelona Olympics and the Atlanta Olympics, there was the World Championships of basketball in 94. It was in Toronto. And Andrew Gaze actually led the whole tournament in scoring. I think he scored 23 points per game. And, on the USA, you got Shaq. You've got great scorers, at the time, starting for that team, you've got Larry Grandmama Johnson, You've got Mark Price, an incredible shooter, starting at the point guard. You've got like these incredible scorers. Alonzo Mourning, power forward center. You've got these incredible scorers from the USA. Yet Drewy, outscored all of them. And obviously he had more of the burden of the team, and I understand that within the team dynamics. The US has had obviously greater talent and won that championship quite convincingly. But nevertheless, it's a great achievement. So Andrew Gaze, in 1989, and this is another thing too, he did 1 year of college in America, and he took Seton Hall College, which was a college that he attended, and he took them all the way to the Final Four, to the NCAA championship. That's the penultimate game in college basketball in America, for those of you who don't know. And Seton Hall was not a big time basketball program at all. Like, they defeated teams like, I believe they defeated Duke University in the semi-final, in the Final Four, and Andrew Gaze was instrumental in that game. Like, Drewy was often their top scorer in big games, and this was like the top college basketball played in America. And he played incredible in that season. I think he was a real novelty, because back in 1989 there wasn't as many Australians going over to America, particularly basketball players. So he was a real novelty to them. This guy that was just an incredible shooter, great basketball player, not much of an athlete. He definitely didn't look like an athlete, but it goes to show you looks can be very deceiving. I've always believed that in basketball. Some of my most toughest opponents just in recreational basketball that I played, and school basketball, obviously high school and things like that, and rep and stuff like that. The opponents that have absolutely torched me have often been guys that just are not good athletes, and you look at them and you just think, I'm going to be quicker than this guy. I feel like, I got a lot of different advantages, and they just torch you because of fundamentals, because of skills, and just, basketball IQ. And Andrew Gaze was just the epitome of that. So, then Drewy also played for the Washington Bullets in 1994. I think he had a couple of 10-day contracts. Played decent, but, it was a difficult situation. They weren't very successful that season or around in that whole era, really, Washington in the early 90s. And then it was really good karma for him, because he'd worked so hard, he'd given a lot to Australian basketball, and then he got picked up by the San Antonio Spurs in the twilight of his career, really, in 1999. And they won a championship. So Drew's got an NBA ring. But, he didn't play a whole lot of minutes that season. But if anyone's deserving of an NBA championship ring for their contributions for basketball just in general, internationally and in their home country, it's Andrew Gaze. Okay, at small forward, our second member of the current Boomers team that makes this all-time Boomers side, Joe Ingles. So, just a really unorthodox left-handed, swingman, great range, three-point shooting, can get to the hole, deceptively quick and agile. Not speedy, but he can get to the lane, with his just great basketball vision. Again, like Drewy, his IQ. And being a left-hander, very difficult to guard, because he can go both ways. And going left with his, he's running bank shots and finger rolls to couple with that great three-point range, just, he's got to be here. And he's been, I think he's played the same amount of Olympics as Patty Mills from 2008 all the way through to this year. Got picked up by the Utah Jazz in 2014, has played there ever since, and has made a real successful career in the NBA. So Joe Ingles, starting small forward for my all-time Boomers basketball team. Alright, now at the 4 spot. So it was, originally I was thinking, okay, you got two great centers, Andrew Bogut, Luke Longley, who do you pick? I got to go with both of them. And the cool thing is that both of them are very versatile players. Particularly, well, they both are, but particularly Bogut, a little bit more mobile than Longley. Longley, just a huge man, 7'2". Even in the NBA, he was always one of the biggest guys. I remember Phil Jackson, the Chicago Bulls coach, saying that was, and no disrespect to Luke, but that was the main reason why he was looking at Luke. But then also Luke had incredible passing skills and court vision, great teammate as well. But more with Luke Longley in a moment. So Andrew Bogut, I went for at the 4 spot. He's got a little bit more range, a little bit more mobile, can defend fours probably better than Luke Longley. Longley would often struggle in those two NBA Finals series, Chicago Bulls against Utah Jazz in 97 and 98. The Bulls had Longley guarding Karl Malone most of the time, the great power forward from Utah Jazz, and Longley did his best, but he really struggled just because foot speed. It was hard to, once Malone turned the corner or decided to face him up, take him off the dribble, it's pretty hard for Luke to keep up with him, even though Luke had a lot of size on him and used that to his advantage at different times. Andrew Bogut, what can we say? Number 1 draft pick in the NBA draft of 2005. That's just incredible. For an Aussie to achieve that, it's awesome. And then had a very successful career with the Milwaukee Bucks. Unfortunately, injuries kind of got in his way. I think he would have been a perennial all-star had he been able to stay healthy and been blessed with a little bit more of a just a bit more luck with his injuries. I really feel for him in that respect. But he put several great seasons together, particularly 2010. And then in Golden State got his NBA championship ring, which was great, much deserving. And it's awesome to know that he's got an NBA championship ring because he deserves it. Coming back from all those injuries, he could have retired a few different times, quite easily with that initial contract that he got and subsequently. So, but definitely Andrew Bogut, great hands, great skills, your prototypical Aussie big man, good passer too. And that's what our big men are known for. Which brings us to Luke Longley, probably our most celebrated player in terms of achievement at the highest level. Obviously playing with the great Michael Jordan, and then unbelievable teammates Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman. What a team they had. Tony Kukoc, who just recently got inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame last week. Much deserving to Tony Kukoc. But Luke Longley, okay, what was his assets? I always thought it was his passing. He was a really, really good passer from the high and low post. Just fit, like if there was ever a center that fitted into that Tex Winter triangle offense that the Chicago Bulls ran from 1990 onwards, once Phil Jackson became coach, all throughout the 90s when Phil was coach, that triangle offense was perfectly suited to a T to Luke Longley. Like, it would have been incredible to have a centre like Shaquille O'Neal, David Robinson, Patrick Ewing, and probably the best centre from that era, Hakeem Olajuwon. But I don't know if the Bulls might have traded it for any of them because obviously they would have. But what I'm saying is for team chemistry and to fit the players around him like Jordan and Pippen, Luke Longley was the man. He was the perfect fit at centre because he was a very big body, good hands, and great passing. So, and obviously defensively, massive body, could clog up the lane. He'd go head to head with Shaq. Shaq could always, Shaq, he's going to get his 25 to 30 points, 10 to 15 rebounds, but Longley would go at him. And internationally, Luke Longley burst on the scene, 1988 Olympics at Seoul, went to New Mexico State on a college scholarship the next year. And the rest is history. Drafted by Minnesota. I think he was the 6th overall pick in 1992. Got traded to the Bulls 1993, and Michael Jordan was retired at the time. But a couple of years later, MJ returns. Luke Longley gets to put some bling on 3 fingers from 3 rings, and much deserving. And it was a great documentary that was done. I think it was an ABC production. But all you got to do is YouTube Luke Longley documentary, and there's 2 parts to it. It's brilliant. It was brought out just only a few weeks ago, actually. Like, might have been in August. So awesome, and Michael Jordan speaks a lot on Luke and has some great things, and just honest things too to say. And they have honest things to say about each other, which is the way it is. So yeah, it was really, really good. So Luke Longley, my starting centre for the Australian Boomers all-time team ever. Okay, let's now get to the bench. Okay, coming off the bench for my Australian Boomers all-time greatest team. Starting off now with the hammer, Shane Heal. So what a phenomenal competitor and just a great long-range shooter. Shane Heal, just a perennial NBL all-star. All throughout from his career back in 1988 all the way through to the mid-2000s. He won multiple NBL championships with the Sydney Kings. And, now, he went to the 1992, 96 and 2000 Olympics, as well as 2004 so that's 4 Olympics. There's not many who have done that. We've got Joe, we've got Paddy, we've got Andrew Gaze, not too many more that played in 4 Olympics. But yeah, Shane Heal, just an incredible 3-point shooter. I sometimes wonder if Shane Heal was maybe born 15, 20 years later. If he was playing now, man, this is his kind of game. Open floor, he was good off the dribble, deceptively quick off the dribble, and just I'm talking about major league 3-point accuracy and range. Like, the dude, he was like, you don't want to compare anyone to Steph Curry, but he was like that kind of, let's be honest, that lower level Steph Curry version in Australia, which is a huge compliment. Trust me, I'm putting him up there, in terms of Australia and what he did here in the NBL and what he would do in international competition. And speaking of that, whenever we'd play the American teams, a lot of teams would bow down and back off the American teams, but Shane Heal would go right at them, never being intimidated. He'd actually lift with his aggressiveness, his intensity. And I mean, when you're taking on Sir Charles Barkley himself, which Hammer Heel did. Sorry, I'm lost for words because I remember watching that game in 1996. It was a pre-Olympics game in Salt Lake City at the Utah Jazz Arena. Australia playing USA. And Shane Heal he just went off, man. I think he hit 7 3-pointers in the game. But just in that first quarter or first half, he must have hit 4 or 5 just in that first quarter and second quarter. And, him and Barkley were chest bumping. I mean, Shane Heal's only 6'1", maybe 180, 185 pounds. Barkley's 250, 260 pounds, 6'5", And, but that was who Shane Heal was. He was a dog. He was a competitor. And that's what we all loved about him because, us here from down under, part of our sports psyche is we compete, and we compete hard. We compete honestly, we compete fairly, we compete hard. And, we don't back down because of images or because of, someone's status. That's always been an Australian way, genuine, true, treat everyone the same, respect, doesn't matter how much money you're making or what NBA contract you got. We're competing, we're going at you, and we're going to do it respectfully and fairly, and at the end of the game we'll shake your hand and show good sportsmanship and respect. But yeah, Shane Heal really epitomised that, and just a great 3-point shooter. Did play in the NBA briefly, played for Minnesota in the 96-97 season, and again, just had some incredible nights where he would hit just 3-pointer after 3-pointer. I think there was one game he hit I'm sure it was 6 or 7 3-pointers, and that was a lot, especially for back then. It isn't for now, one game, but for back then. But if he was playing now, I honestly believe he would be a really, really valuable NBA player. He'd have a 10-year NBA career, particularly with his competitiveness. So yeah, Shane Heal definitely earned that 6th spot on the Boomers all-time team. Okay, here's one that you guys might not know so much about. So here I am to educate you. Eddie Pavlinskas. So Eddie grew up, I believe, in Canberra and spent some time in Melbourne as well, and played in the local, leagues, which was the predecessor to the NBL. And played a bit in Canberra, played a bit in Melbourne, and he came from Latvian and Russian descent, but I believe was born and raised in Australia. And he was just a flat out, talk about shooter, and we just mentioned Shane Heal. But one of the cool things about Eddie Pavlinskas is he very much blazed the trail. He's like the trailblazer for Australians going over to America, which is obviously the heartbeat of basketball throughout this world. And, it is what it is. And basketball is such a world game, along with soccer, the two, most populated sports all around the world. But definitely, America's where the top of the top goes to test themselves. in terms of basketball. And Eddie Pavlinskas back in the late 60s did that. It's crazy. I couldn't believe when I was going through his career. So he attended a junior college, which is often the route when you can't get like a 4-year Division I college scholarship. But Eddie attended Rick's Junior College, which is now known as BYU Idaho. And he led the nation in free throw percentage at 92.4%. Now, this is a bit of a recurrent theme because he went on to be like a shooting coach to the stars. Eddie Pavlinskas was actually Shaq's free throw and shooting coach when Shaq was playing for the Lakers, all throughout late 90s, early 2000s. And he coached just multiple NBA players with their shooting, particularly with free throw shooting. He's done a lot of seminars, a lot of clinics, a lot of academies, all this related to shooting. The dude was just a prodigy when it comes to shooting. He then went on to the famous Louisiana State University, which is where Shaq actually went, coincidentally enough, later on. After playing in the Munich Olympics, where he was the second leading scorer in the whole tournament. He only missed the Olympic scoring title by 1 point. But at LSU, Pavlinskas averaged 16 points per game. And again, his free throw shooting, just unbelievable. He was actually drafted in the NBA, so he's the first Australian to be drafted to the NBA coming out of college. I believe he was drafted, I think it was the Atlanta Hawks that drafted Pavlinskas, and then his rights were then transferred to, at the time, the New Orleans Jazz, which is now the Utah Jazz. But I think one of the sad things, Eddie never got to play in the NBA. So our Australian first player who was in the NBA was Luke Longley in 1991-92 season. And it would have been cool to have had a player in the 1970s from Australia. Like, that's a clear 15 years even before Longley. Because before Longley got in the NBA, it was like you had to be from outer space to be in the NBA, like in terms of talent and athleticism. That was the perception. It's not true, but you just got to be a basketball player at that level, right? But in Australians' minds, and probably most people around the world, it was just so far away. But once Longley got there, then you saw a whole run of players. You saw that, these are just basketball players that are making it, and if you've got the skills, to pay the bills, then you've got that opportunity to play at the highest level in the NBA. But it would have been cool. I just wish Eddie Pavlinskas could have had that chance to play for either Atlanta or New Orleans. I think he would have been amazing because, guys, in the 1976 Olympics, he led the whole tournament. He led the world in scoring, clearly. And he actually had the record. I want to get this right, so I'll have a look. He had the record for most points scored in a single Olympics. He actually still has. Oh, no, actually, sorry. He had it until 1988. Yeah, the great Brazilian Oscar Schmidt, the great scorer, broke that in 88. So he had it for 12 years, but he scored 269 points in that Montreal Olympics in 1976. And he scored 48 points in a game against Mexico in overtime at those Olympics. And, Olympic international basketball is different than the NBA. It's a lot more physical. I mean, you would have seen that. A lot of the NBA players were saying exactly the same thing, when the US was struggling in some of those, pre-tournament games. And then, obviously, they lost to France in the first game of the Olympics this year. So it's a lot harder to get those big, just breakout scoring games. But yeah, Eddie did. He was that kind of shooter, eh? So Eddie Pavlinskas, there you go. Basketball world, a little bit more knowledge for you on great Eddie. And, you can do your own research on him. I wish there was video footage. I wish there was more video footage of him. If anyone's got any video footage out there, please send me a link of Eddie playing. I've just gone off records, history, going back through his competition and who he played against and what he achieved. There's no doubt about it. He deserves a spot in this team. And I'm sure if he was around now, again, another one of those players like Shane Heal, if he was playing in this era, he would be a phenomenon with his shooting ability because, shooting and being able to create for yourself is like, it's the new post game. In the 80s and 90s it was a post game, particularly in the 90s. So nowadays the game is definitely suited towards shooters and shifty kind of players who can move laterally quickly and get off their own shot. Eddie Pavlinskas, you would have been running things in the NBA now for sure. You had a good solid career, no doubt about it. Okay, next up is a big man, Mark Bradtke. And Mark Bradtke is a real household name to those in the know in Australian basketball. Played in the 88, 92, 96 and 2000 Olympics, so another part of that four Olympic club. And, he would battle against the biggest and the best, centers and power forwards out there. And that was a tough thing during that era, because often Luke Longley would be unavailable with injury and, in international tournaments. And I think back to 1994, Mark Bradtke had a really big tournament in that game. And I remember the beginning of the game against the USA, he was just taking it to them, and just, that really helped him get then his NBA contract. He played for the Philadelphia 76ers in the 1996-97 season, and was just a stalwart in the NBL, our local professional league. Championships 93-97 with the Melbourne Tigers with Andrew Gaze. And Mark Bradtke, just a solid athlete, very good athlete for someone that big, 6'10", 250, and 240, 250, hovered around weight-wise, and just big body, athletic though for that size. So Mark Bradtke gets a spot as one of the big men on the all-time Boomers team. Okay, next up is another big man, David Anderson. Now, David Anderson, just incredible international career. 2012 Olympics really stepped up, and because Andrew Bogut was absent, so he had to be the starting centre. And just every time he'd play for Australia, he would just, especially in the big games when we play the USA, he would always not only hold his own, but really, really be an effective player, particularly in the paint. Excellent shooter, good post skills, good little jump hook, fadeaway jump shots. Good facing up too. Had a distinguished career in Europe. Attended the Australian Institute of Sport, mid to late 90s. Only played briefly in the NBL here. I think just his talent was so immense. The NBL is a great league. It's a really great league, and if you don't know much about it, those of you international basketball fans watching this video, check out some best of NBL highlights. LaMelo Ball, Rookie of the Year last year. Where did he play? He didn't play in college in America. He played in the NBL here for the Wollongong Hawks. That was his college. And so, ask LaMelo Ball how good the NBL is here in Australia. It's an awesome league. And obviously we're the third best basketball nation in the world now. There's no doubt about that after winning the bronze medal at the Olympics and upon previous performances beating the US on their home turf in Las Vegas just before the Olympics. So, the NBL is starting to get the respect that it deserves, and it deserves a ton of respect. It's one of the best basketball leagues in the world. And but even considering that, David Anderson at the time just had to extend his talents and challenge himself over in Europe, particularly in Europe for a big man. I think it's a good test. Our league is very much a guard swingman type of league. It always has been. We've produced always great players at those positions. And obviously we've had our Longleys and our Boguts. They've been real outliers. But so we can produce some big bodies, that's for sure. But you post-up players like your David Andersons. He was a different kind of player. He's more of a post player than those two, in terms of just finesse moves, and scoring. Just an array of scoring options that he had at his disposal. And eventually got a contract with the Houston Rockets in the NBA. It was awesome that he got the chance to test himself over there. I believe he played for the New Orleans Pelicans as well at one point, in the mid 2010s. So and just finished playing in the NBL. Actually, I'm not sure if he's going to play this season, but he played for Melbourne United last season, 2020. So David Anderson, much deserved spot on the all-time Australian basketball team. Okay, our next spot goes to the hustle man, the type of player who any teammate would be grateful to have on their team, because he's going to do the dirty work, and he's going to be 48 minutes, whatever format you're playing, all-out hustle, or whenever if he's coming off the bench, like he did for Cleveland in the 2016 finals, playoffs, and you probably know who I'm talking about now, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get 100% effort and just genuine work ethic. Matthew Dellavedova, couldn't leave him off. His resume is incredible. Again, part of that 4 Olympic club, 2008 all the way through to 2021. And attended St. Mary's College with Paddy Mills. I think it was 2007 to 2009. And just really took that conference by storm with Paddy. You know, an Aussie backcourt. Who would have thought it in college basketball in America? Awesome. And so Dellavedova did go undrafted to the NBA, but amazing how, you know, despite being undrafted, he, you know, had a really long, distinguished career. I don't want to say he's never going to play in the NBA again, but most likely he's probably not. But he's still playing good basketball. Great basketball. You know, he's playing in the NBL and was part of that Australian Olympic team. But I think he's the type of player that could go undrafted and get picked up, because he went into the Cleveland off-season camp in 2013, and just obviously his effort and his endurance, his conditioning is always amazing. Good three-point shooter, strong going to the basket, not great athleticism, but decent athlete, you know, but conditioning, always in top-tip condition, is always going to outwork and out-hustle the opposition player, which is what he did against Steph Curry in the 2015 finals. And not many people can take Steph Curry out of his rhythm, but when Dellavedova would be put on Curry, I remember it was one finals game when Curry went like 0 for 7 for the times when Dellavedova was guarding him. And that doesn't happen very often. So he was just a incredible defender. Great foot speed, great good lateral foot speed. Brilliant. And, you know, we haven't always had guards like that in Australia, but he broke the mold like that. Really just tenacious perimeter defender. Again, we haven't really had incredible perimeter defenders. We've had great perimeter scorers and floor generals, but yeah, not so much defenders, like one-on-one defenders who could lock players up and stuff. But Dellavedova is it for Australia. So, had, you know, a couple of good seasons in Milwaukee, I think around 2018, 2019. Finished out his NBA time with Cleveland with a season there, and then he's come back and now playing in the NBL here in Australia. Is one name that you probably haven't, or you're not too familiar with, even Australian basketball fans, but Ian Davies. So Ian Davies, again, is a bit similar to Eddie Pavlinskas in terms of he was a forerunner for Australians going over and playing college basketball in America. And unfortunately he didn't get drafted, but he attended a college called Graceland College, and just absolutely played phenomenally over there. Again, you know, born in Tasmania, and then going all the way to America, and I believe he went over there in like 1978, and spent several seasons over there playing college basketball. And again, just wowed them with his shooting. So Ian Davies was an incredible perimeter shooter, and a streak shooter too. Great fundamentals, pretty big for a two guard. He's 6'6", 190, 200. Great shooter, just a flat out scorer, to the point where I was saying Eddie Pavlinskas led the Olympics in scoring in 76. Paddy Mills led the Olympics in scoring in 2008, and then we had Andrew Gaze, 1994 World Championships leading scorer. Australia's had some prolific scorers, man. Like you think about, we've never won a medal until this year in a major men's basketball tournament. We've always been thereabouts, a few fourth places, fifth, sixth. And to think that we've had so many top scorers, but that's our game. It's offensive, it's shooting. There's a lot of subtleties, and it's not from athleticism either. Our players generally aren't blessed with great athleticism. Just awesome shooters, great skills, and confidence and a brashness to get your shot off in any situation and deliver. And Ian Davies also possessed those qualities. So in the 1980 Olympics in Moscow, Ian Davies led the tournament in scoring. Yes, in scoring, points per game. I want to get the numbers right because that's an incredible achievement, at that time. So here we go. He scored 29.3 points per game. That's ballistic in international competition. And in the 1982 World Championships, just 2 years later, he scored the second most total points at an average of 23 points per game. So the guy was he was money. And, in the NBL, he's known as just a prolific scorer, particularly for the Newcastle Falcons in the mid-80s. And then he went on to play for Sydney Kings amongst a few other teams. But those two teams primarily. And, just a streak shooter. Sadly, Ian's not with us anymore, but Ian, you'll always remembered as a great shooter, a tremendous basketball player, and one of the greats of all time in Australia, a real trailblazer, heading over to America and playing college basketball. So, Ian Davies, all-time Australian basketball team, in my opinion. All right, and the final spot goes to... Now, this will be a bit controversial. I've got a few notable omissions that I'll discuss after I talk about the coach as well. But the final spot on the 12-man roster for the Boomers all-time basketball team goes to Andrew Vlahoff. Now, Andrew Vlahoff is one of those few players to have played in 4 Olympics for Australia. He joins that 4 club. You notice there's a few in here, but there's not too many more beyond these men who are in this team. And Vlahoff was a phenomenon in Australia in terms of consistency, success. He won multiple NBL championships, always as the leading or second leading scorer for the Perth Wildcats. But more than that, he was an all-round player. He was a bit of a walking triple-double. Consistently getting 10 to 12, 15 rebounds, could get you 10 assists as well, good passer. Vlahoff stood 6'7". He would have weighed around, I'd say, 230, maybe 240 at his bulkiest. He was a strong guy, very, very strong. And often when Australia would play the US during that 90s period, Vlahoff would be given the assignment of guarding, the American power forward. And in that time, it was, you're either looking at Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, 2 just massively, thick, strongly built men. Derek Coleman at the 94 World Championships, Larry Johnson. And Vlahoff, physically and strength-wise, he would hold his own. And it's just probably one of the reasons why he never quite got in the NBA. Maybe was, I'm not sure about his different opportunities. I do know, he was looked at different stages, particularly in the mid-90s, around 93, 94, 95. He would have had a chance because he won a couple of NBL championships at that time, was playing for Australia in their starting 5. At the 3 or 4 spot, depending on whether Longley was available, really. It was probably the thing that maybe held him back was, a bit of lack of foot speed, possibly the ability to be able to create his own shot one-on-one at that level. In the NBL he could do it, for sure, which, again, very high level, the highest here in Australia. But that was probably what held Vlahoff back from really reaching those NBA heights. But nevertheless, an incredible career both internationally and domestically here in Australia. And like I was mentioning, he was a really solid all-around player, a potential walking triple-double, at NBL level, and also at international level. He could easily get you double-figure points, rebounds, and assists. So Andrew Vlahoff certainly and well-deservedly gains the 12th and final roster spot on my all-time Australian Boomers basketball team. And it's just my opinion. I'd love for you guys to comment and provide some feedback in the comments, whether you agree with my team, what changes would you have made if you would like to make some changes, if you were to pick a team such as this. I'd love to hear back from you guys. It'd be great. All right, now we come to the coach. Now, there are a few different contenders that could have taken out the coaching spot, but it came down to one man who oversaw really the Australian golden period. And it looks like Australian basketball is headed for another golden era right now, particularly with this bronze medal victory, and a lot of the players being very young in the Boomers team at this point in time. But I would have to opt for the man who oversaw the Boomers from 1993 to just after the 2000 Sydney Olympics, and that is Barry Barnes. Now, Coach Barnes took over the Australian Boomers' top coaching position, head coaching position, from Adrian Hurley, who was instrumental in really driving up, Australian basketball's depth. He had a lot to do with the Australian Institute of Sport during the 1980s, which was formed initially in 1981. And a lot of great players came out of that institute and went on to play for Australia. Barnes was actually an assistant coach at the 88 Olympics, I believe, and the 92 Barcelona Olympics under Hurley. And then Barry Barnes took over the spot. But Barry Barnes led Australia to a 4th place position, its highest at the time, at the Atlanta Olympics. Australia also came 4th in the 88 Olympics. That was their highest initially. And then we got 4th in 96 at Atlanta, and then Barry Barnes also helped coach. He did head coach the Boomers to a 4th spot in Sydney in 2000. And 4th place is nothing to sneer at, especially in a sport like basketball at the Olympics, because what one must remember is that basketball, along with soccer, or known as football in many parts of the world, those two sports are the two widely most participated and played sports in terms of number of countries that participate at international level in the world. So, to come 4th in basketball would be the equivalent of many other sports medaling for certain. Barry Barnes, great record. If you ask the players, that's usually one of the better indicators, and all the players during that time, they all say that Barry Barnes was just an awesome coach to play for. So, Barry Barnes, the head coach of Danmarsky's all-time Australian Boomers basketball team. Now, I did have a few notable omissions, and it was very difficult to leave the following 3 players off this squad. But I just wanted to say that, mention these 3 players' names for sure, because they were the ones that I was really, really struggling, to leave out of the team. And it came down to some really close decisions. So Chris Anstey, an ultra-talented athlete, had several stints in the NBA and played very effectively. Had success in Europe, in Russia, in very high standard leagues. Had a great career back here in the NBL, multiple championships, an MVP. It was very difficult to leave Chris off this squad. Probably the one thing that kind of tilted it towards a couple of the other players' advantage over Chris, just in that 12-man squad, was because it's a Boomers team, it was the international experience and credentials. Chris unfortunately didn't get to play for Australia as much as us Aussie basketball fans would have loved for him to be able to, not through any fault of his own that I'm aware of. It was, he had different injuries that kept him out of a couple of different, Olympic campaigns, and different circumstances that prevented him from playing for the Boomers as much as he could have potentially, for sure. And then the second player would be Phil Smyth. Now, many of you would not know Phil Smyth, but Phil Smyth, his nickname was the General, and that pretty much sums up the way that he played. He was a point guard, 6'1" point guard, and he was the general on the floor. He was basically like a second coach for Australia all the way from 1984 through to 96. He was in Atlanta still. So he was another one of those 4 Olympians, 84, 88, 92 and 96. Had a distinguished NBL career. There was just so much guard talent, like Dellavedova, Heel, and then obviously Paddy Mills. Couldn't leave those guards, those point guards, out of the squad. But Phil Smyth, certainly you remembered as a great Australian basketball player. And then finally, one of the current crop, 2021, and he might force his way into that my all-time team. Certainly, I hope he does over years to come, because I'd love to see him continue to play great. I really enjoy watching Aaron Baines play. And Aaron, has had a great NBA career as well. He won an NBA championship back in 2014 as a teammate of Australia's Paddy Mills at the Spurs. Had some good stints, had some productive time for the Phoenix Suns. Unfortunately, wasn't able to hang around for now that they're really cooking and will challenge for an NBA championship again this coming season. But Aaron unfortunately got injured, I think, during the second game of the Olympics this year I think it was the match against Italy, I believe, or it might have been Germany. It was one of those two teams. But he sustained an injury, and I honestly believe that him being out of the game against the US in the semi-finals was a big, big blow for the Boomers. Just remember, the Boomers were winning quite handsomely in the second quarter of that game against the US, who obviously went on to win gold. And I just feel like Kevin Durant was really the player that honestly kept the US in touch with Australia in the first half. And Baines probably would have been given the assignment of guarding Durant. And I think just his size, and he's very rugged, physical player. I think he would have been certainly a big asset for Australia in that game. Not to say that Australia would have won. You got to give credit where credit's due. The US won the game. You can only play who's out on the court, right? But it'll be great to see Aaron back healthy and playing for Australia, in future World Championships, and hopefully he'll be back for the 2024 Olympics, where hopefully Australia can go a couple of steps, higher even more, and play in that gold medal match and win it. But those three players, it's very difficult to leave them out. But guys, that is my all-time Australian Boomers basketball team. I hope you enjoyed the video. I've been a fan of obviously of basketball, ever since I was a child. But I've been watching Australian basketball and the Australian Boomers. I can remember my first game watching them just on television at the Olympics, 1988 at Seoul, when Australia went on that dream run to finish their highest ever, coming fourth. So, and obviously every Olympic campaign since then, World Championships in between. I was lucky to see some games in person at the Goodwill Games in 2001. Australia played the US in Brisbane. That was an awesome experience to go and see in person. And hopefully you get a chance to see many more great games and experiences for sure. We can look forward to that. And Australian basketball fans, the future is massively bright after the third place finish. And it was a pleasure to be able to look back through the annals of my experience and think about my time seeing these players, watching them play in real time, and be able to come up with this team in honour of what Australian basketball has achieved at these most recent Olympic Games. So, thank you very much for your support. If you haven't already, please subscribe, and look forward to bringing out much more great content and many more wonderful videos. And thank you very much. Have a wonderful day. Much love to you all. Peace, and I'll see you very soon. Thank you.